welcome back to this online extension of the county seat program about House Bill 276. We've done another juggling of the chairs up here on the panel. Joining us, our panel, along with Representative Kevin Stratton and Representative Mike Noel, is Mark Ward, who is the public lands attorney for the Utah Association of Counties. We have our county sheriffs, and we have some people that have some questions and some concerns.
Ruth Ann Frost.
Ruth Ann, who is the original legislative
Research General Counsel. She's the drafting attorney on this bill.
She wrote the language. So the time now belongs to all of you back and forth to just carry on the conversation. And we already have one question that was reserved first spot at the very back. And so we will start there. And each time, just state your name.
So my name is Sam Bushman, and I'm just a citizen. I'm an American. And I personally consider Mike Noel and many of the sheriffs that are here today personal friends. And I want to make this very clear that there are several of us that have concerns about the bills. Just because we have concerns about the bills, that does not mean we completely oppose what's happening here today. And I bring that up because there's all kinds of false premise out there. You know what, if I'm for the lands being transferred to Utah, which I am, then I'm for the bill. That may not necessarily be the case with some people. The other idea is that, you know what, we're going to debate whether it affects the sheriff or not. Some sheriffs would say, no, it doesn't. But then they would say, because it's so limited in scope, and that's the key, is to limit the scope. Well, what if we just limit the scope even further? What if we look at it a different way, which would be, you know what, sheriffs oftentimes create joint jurisdiction and or deputize people. There's ways to have the sheriff remain the chief law enforcement official within his jurisdiction, his county, and at the same time allow, through granting privileges to state representatives, to serve under their direction and not threaten the sheriff's jurisdiction. And that's really the battle, as we're setting up joint jurisdictional concerns here that today may not be a problem.
I'll explain it.
But if Bill Clinton was the governor of our state, it would instantly become a problem. And so the reason that I give you this example is to say that just because we oppose the bill, let's not use terms like wild-eyed theories and strange terms that marginalize people. Let's come together for solutions. Let's find ways to sit down and as Representative Noel said very well, you know what, let's tweak this thing so that it satisfies people. Let's come together and do that. Let's not use statements that marginalize people and that put people, in the, pardon the phrase, in the back of the bus. Let's bring people together in such a way to find solutions. And that's really what I'm all about. I'm not criticizing anyone here. I am telling you there are Agenda 21 concerns with the bill, and I'll take that to the bank. I'll even bring in a prominent Agenda 21 educator by the name of Tom DeWeese to discuss this in detail, line by line. I also submit to you with the sheriffs, we can't say there's no challenge to the sheriff, but yet, you know what, we've eked out this line that says they have jurisdictional authority with the following line items. That sets up a joint jurisdictional conundrum for the future. We can do it better than that, people, and that's all we're trying to ask for. Is that a conspiracy theory? I think not.
Sam, can I answer the first part of that? Okay.
Sure.
I'm going to have Mark respond to that too, and possibly Ruth Ann. There is that joint conundrum right now in the state. Do you agree with that?
Agreed, yes.
Yeah.
I do agree with that.
Okay, so this is the issue. You say we don't necessarily, because we agree with the transfer of public lands, we want that to happen, but that doesn't mean we address the bill. I want you to take the bill in the whole context of what it's put out there for. The bill is out there and it's not implemented because what's happening right now is what I expect to happen. We're answering some of the most difficult questions that people have given me. It doesn't really this is the first time a law enforcement issue's come up. The most difficult questions are this: is this land going to remain public? The answer to that is yes. Is this land going to allow for my in-holdings that I have in the billions of dollars? Am I protected? There's so many groups when you start working with public land, and I know this because I did it for 20 years. You got 30 million acres. This group wants it all set aside, 9 million acres for wilderness. This group wants to make sure we got grazing on every square inch. This group wants to make sure we have something else. So it's out there now, and these issues that you're expressing right now and bringing forward are credible issues. But that doesn't mean that this bill is going to stay like this. That was never my intent. When I testified with this bill, Sam, I said this. Let me finish just a minute. When I testified in committee with this bill, I said, this is a placeholder bill. This is to get out to the public first and foremost that these lands in Utah will remain public except for some of the lands that may be sold off for need. So that's the whole purpose of the bill. So I think you do agree with the bill if we're going through the format like we're having right now, if we amend it, if we fix it, if we answer these questions, which I'm totally open to.
And I commend you for that, and I would say you're calling our points credible, and I thank you for that. I would say the talk show host called them wild-eyed theories, which I reject.
Okay.
Okay, so I do want to redirect one question to you, because this is an honest question. I couldn't get in. I can tell you have a radio program because I couldn't get in edgewise.
I am not afraid to answer questions,
Okay.
sir.
So what do you do in a situation where, let's talk brand inspectors. Now, this is a fair question. You have brand inspectors. If he has to be deputized in each county and he has a multi-county task.
Yeah, 29 county jurisdiction.
Yes. What happens when he's answering to two bosses and they give him conflicting points of view on how to enforce?
Let me answer the question to you this way. And I'll use a marriage as an example. If you're a kid, do you have two bosses to answer to? Hold on. Do you have two bosses to answer to?
Okay.
If it's done wrong, the answer is yes. If it's done right, the answer is no.
So now, wait a minute.
Okay.
That's a generalization there too. That can.
No, hold on. What I'm saying is
You
that
just set up a
False premise.
no, that's not correct. Here's what I'm saying to you, and I'll make it more clear. I used an analogy to make the point that, a kid doesn't answer to two different authorities unless they're divided. And so I submit to you that there is a way. It's called the court. And the courts can deal with some of these things if there are joint jurisdictions that are at odds with each other. There's ways to resolve those things.
How does Brown deal with that? How does that agent?
Well, I'll answer that question this way.
Sheriff Perkins, who says, I want you to handle this way, and he has to answer to Sheriff Decker, who says, I want you to handle it this way, and those two are at odds with each other. How does he do it?
All right,
Because
so
he
what
has to answer to both of
What
them.
you do is you take redress of grievances if there's a conflict to the courts. If you feel like it needs to be codified better than that, there's always legislative opportunities. But what you don't do is create judge, jury, executioner in one entity because you have a conflict. What you do is you use the checks and balances our founders gave us to deal with these decisions. You've got the courts, you've got the legislative, and you've got the executive. The sheriff is under the executive. And what you do is you use the checks and balances. If you have continual conflicts, usually they codify it in legislation. And then if there's interpretation needed, you go to the courts. There are ways to resolve husband and wife disputes with children, and there are ways to solve jurisdictional disputes through the checks and balances.
Okay, let's let this pass on to somebody else.
Excellent. But you asked a question, and you got to give me a chance to answer it.
Mark, let's let Mark answer that if he could.
Couple of things.
Mark's the general counsel for Utah Association of Counties.
Yeah, I categorically reject the notion that you should. I categorically reject the notion that you should draft your statutes vague and then leave it to the courts to interpret. The good legislation takes away vagueness. Good legislation takes away guesswork. Now, in the way the bill's currently drafted, the authority of the DLM to do law enforcement doesn't even kick in. It doesn't kick in automatically. If you read the bill carefully, it only kicks in if the director of the DLM decides he wants it to kick in. He has to hire and employ peace officers. And then he has to actually deploy them. And that's discretionary with the director. The director could decide not to deploy those, in which case jurisdiction, even for protecting resources, defaults to the county sheriff. Okay? Now, yeah, that can be tweaked in the future, but as a representative of county government, let me tell you, sometimes counties, and I think you read it in a little bit in the pause that some of the sheriffs gave to some of the questions, sheriffs and counties may not necessarily want to take on every single little possible law enforcement issue. It's worked well for years for DWR peace officers to handle wildlife issues. Maybe, maybe not. I'm not here to defend them. But the wisdom of the bill, as Representative Stratton said, it's a tip-off. And so what better way to draft a tip-off than to try to have it mirror as much as possible status quo? What is status quo right now? Status quo is the sheriffs have general jurisdiction. Then there are some exceptions. When it comes to BLM protecting resources, by federal rule and regulation, they have authority to do that. That's Public Lands 101. Everybody knows that. Well, what this bill did was try to sort of generally mirror that principle. It said sheriffs will have general jurisdictional law enforcement authority unless BLM's counterpart, which is now DLM, through its director, decides it wants to employ and deploy peace officers for that purpose. Now, maybe that model isn't the model that Utah ends up with through dialogue. But I think as a starter, you're going to draft a bill so at least it captures that basic concept. It captures those basic contours. And the contours now are that the sheriff enforces all laws unless A, DWR peace officers want to enforce laws for somebody poaching wildlife, or B, BLM officers want to prosecute somebody for defacing resources. That's the way it is now. Sheriffs understand that. So start with that general proposition, and yeah, maybe in the future when the lands do transfer, or as we get closer to that, as Representative Stratton says, it's a tip-off. As we get closer to the buzzer, then maybe we can refine those things.
And I believe you had a question, ma'am. I think your hand was up first. Yep. And then when you're done, you can pass it next door.
All right, thanks.
And your name? Stand up. So
Oh, all right. My name's Hazel Marsh. I'm going to come at it from a little bit different angle. Is this loud enough? Yeah? Okay, so Agenda 21, I'm sure we're all well aware and we've researched that in depth, right? And if you haven't, I hope you go home and do that. I come at this angle from the angle of a weeping mother. And I have one comment for the sheriffs in this room. We've seen these legislators admit that it takes away your authority in wilderness area. I've watched them say that. They're on record saying that. If you want to see it for yourself, go to defendingutah.org and research this. And I implore you to protect our families. I am not a feminist woman, and I desire to admire a man that upholds the Constitution, that protects our families from the impending threat against us, including Agenda 21. I would like to admire each of the sheriffs and men in this room as much as I do Scott Bradley. I cannot find anything wrong with his logic, with the things that he has said, in his rhetoric and the things that he puts out there. I can definitely find arrogance in the legislators that seek to lift themselves up from what they're doing. They seek to get gain and power. And I'm not naming names, but in general, that's how we fall. And I beg of you to reconsider and demand that the governor veto this bill and please protect our families, our grandchildren. Look at what is coming, please.
Maybe, can I respond to that?
Sure.
I mean, the point that she made about wilderness, I think she's talking about wilderness in BLM wilderness, which again does not take the control of the sheriff away. The federal law enforcement takes on a lot of those things. Federal law enforcement does. This bill only takes place when we get the lands back from the federal government, and it has nothing to do with wilderness as per se as the federal wilderness like we see trying to be created in other areas. It has nothing to do with that at all. You're confusing federal managed wilderness with what we have in Utah, which is an area of very limited scope as far as wilderness, and that has no impact on what the sheriff's authority is. In fact, I'll read you a statement from Reed Richards. Reed Richards is the legal counsel for the Sheriff's Association. He wrote this to me today because I think this is important. Hi, Mike. I'm sorry I won't be able to be with you today. We are traveling out of state. I did review HB 276 and found no problems relating to sheriff's authority. It appeared to me that you were attempting to clarify and enhance the powers of the sheriff, not decrease them. So, pardon me?
Not a lie.
No, it's not a lie. I don't know. I don't know where you come up with that.
You're misinformed. You are respectfully, you are terribly misinformed.
I'm addressing the sheriff.
I know, but I trust you believe what you're saying, but you are grossly misinformed. There is nothing, before this bill, before House Bill 276, there is nothing in the Utah Constitution or nothing in the Utah Code that expressly declares the primary jurisdictional authority of the sheriffs. This is a beachhead. This bill establishes a beachhead in that respect.
Okay.
Well, what he's saying, this, ma'am, is this, is that you're saying that we're lying, and that's a hard point to start from when you say we're lying. But, I mean, I've got legal counsel here. Ruth Ann is right here. She works for the state of Utah. She's bipartisan support, legislative research and general counsel. Would you please address that point, that where it takes the power away in a wilderness area? I'd like her to talk to that. Go ahead, stand up, Ruth Ann. She works in our legal counsel, so.
Right. I just want to reiterate what Representative Noel said. My name is Ruth Ann Frost. I'm a nonpartisan attorney for the legislature, which means I'm not for or against the bill in any way. I'm just here to explain what it says. And Mark Ward, oh, I'm sorry. I was talking to
Talk
you.
this way. Sorry.
Like Mark Ward said, this is, I'm more comfortable if I can read it.
Okay.
The primary law enforcement authority is going to be the county sheriff on public lands. The two exceptions are, as Representative Noel mentioned, DWR is going to continue to enforce Title 23, and there is an option for the director of the Division of Land Management to employ and deploy peace officers to enforce 63L Chapter 8 only. So like we're talking about, if there's a murder on public lands or someone is speeding on public lands, that's going to be the county sheriff. If someone's violating their grazing agreement or their right-of-way agreement, that might be the county sheriff. That might be these officers that could be deployed under the DLM. I just want to re-emphasize what Representative Noel said. This isn't going to go into effect until there's 100,000 acres. It's not going to be staffed until there's 100,000 acres. And I think, really importantly, there's no appropriation. And what you have to remember is, even though the language says the director may employ and utilize within the DLM certified peace officers, the legislature has to appropriate the money to pay these people. And there's no appropriation in the bill. So, I mean, if we do get 100,000 acres, it'll still be going back to the legislature for the DLM director to sort of say, this is what I think I need, for the legislature to go through the appropriations process. I mean, this is not an automatic staffing situation by any means. And
Okay.
I hope that helps.
Okay. Is yours a new comment or a drawing? Yeah, I'm gonna go Cameron, Sheriff Perkins.
I wish
and then
Cameron
what
would
you kind of
comment.
roll from there. Cameron.
I wish Ken would comment on this.
I wanted to address the lady there. I feel sorry for her, and I understand that. I'm a sheriff, got 23 years of law enforcement experience. I'm a veteran of a foreign war. I fought for my country in Operation Desert Storm. I'm also a member of the Constitutional Sheriff's Peace Officer Association, founded by Sheriff Richard Mack. Most of the sheriffs sitting here are members of that. I've spoke at their conferences, and I helped draft the document that makes that organization work and take place. We all want to defend the Constitution. I've done it my entire life. And my father is Representative Noel, and there's absolutely, I know him very well, and there's no way we would ever want this bill to take away from our authority or the Constitution. We just want to work with the folks that have problems with it. The only thing I have to disagree with what she said was the website and the way that it was produced. It came out in the cloak of darkness. This bill's been around for 2 years. We've had people, Mr. Reed Richards, that's followed it, and we've continued to follow it, and we would never have done that. So that's my only concern with what she had to say, and I'm sure the representatives and any of the sheriffs want to work with her or anyone else in reference to that, and we appreciate you being here.
Okay, Cameron, to Sheriff Perkins now, and then back. I'm sorry, I forgot.
Did the young lady, she leave, I guess?
Danny, talk this
Yeah.
direction.
You what?
Kind of talk this direction. There are cameras rolling.
Okay, I just, first of all, I'd like to thank her for the support of the sheriff and on our responsibilities. That's actually kind of heartwarming to have somebody support you in a role that we all take very serious. That's why we're here. But I'm telling you, I'm from Garfield County, and it's almost become a full-time job to protect the rights of citizens like that young lady that you just heard. Keeping our roads open, even, I'm talking about even our state roads. We've had problems with the federal government wanting to control Highway 12. So yeah, I'm in this fight, and the sheriffs are not going to let anything walk over the responsibilities that we have swore to protect. And I would much rather deal with it at a state level as I would at a federal level.
Okay, thank you. And
No, I'm just going to take a real quick second, and then this gentleman here kind of, I fully hear what he's saying. Again, Mr. Noel, and I want to say to this young man right here, thank you for your service. Because I was in Virginia Beach, Virginia, when 9/11 went down. And that's all military. And I'll tell you what, it was a very sobering thing. But as the years pass by, I've had to open my eyes to some stuff that just really disgust you. And it's hard to go there. I know the laws of the land. I know that this land we talk about, this promised land, and I'm talking this entire nation, is a covenant land. And I know that document called the Constitution is a divine document. And I know these gentlemen here, I could literally probably to a man, and I don't know any of them, but I know they love their country and that they have sworn that oath, and they know what it is. Two things. You can't put milk back into a spilt bottle. One. Two, Nancy Pelosi. Healthcare. These are two things. First, with milk back into the bottle that's been spilt, it's already spilt. What we have the heart, and I agree with you, Mr. Noel. We have a heart and we have a working model, a start. We have a start. But what I'm having a hard time with, and it's been a long time, because there's this push to get it passed. What are the guarantees that, okay, the governor signs it into bill. The one part of that bill that just sends shivers up my spine, and this gentleman said it so well, is the changing of a letter. Agenda 21 thing, it's very real, but yet it's been marginally said it's a bunch of tin-foiled hats believing that stuff. No, it is an agenda. So we need to look at that as citizens of this nation and of this state. Utah has been the leader of this. I commend you for that. Don't take your eye off the ball right now. So if this thing were to go into and be passed into, what are the guarantees? Do we really need a BLM? Or is the BLM or DLM now just the staterized BLM? I just lost a very dear friend in the state of Oregon. This is a very sobering conversation. I went to his funeral. He was a righteous man. I was on the phone all the time with Shauna Cox. She's a personal friend of mine. I know their intent. I know they are not militia bearing whatever. There are evil people within the militia whatever. I just know, and there's gentlemen in here that know and have known Lavoy Finicum. He was a righteous man, a good man that was just trying to do the right things. Yes, right on. We had a state that has taken back the land. That's awesome. Let's keep going on that, but and you've said, let's keep working on this. And I'm talking, the only part that I see, and I think the vast voices out there are pushing back on, is the part about adding to. And that's what the DLM. We need to look at that. Is the DLM just a regurgitated part? So
To have nothing is anarchy.
I know that you're vested in this bill. I want us all to do the right thing. And that's it.
I'm with you. I forget your name. What was your name?
Jerome Badura.
Okay, Jerome.
I'm not a politician, and I just...
Yeah, I understand. You know where I'm from by any chance? I'm from Kanab. I live out in Johnson Canyon. Shauna Cox is in my ward. Did you know that? Yes. And Shauna, you need to read what she said in her latest, on her latest post, what she said. I was there yesterday. Okay. Anyway, I don't know what she's telling you, but she's telling me that she's fine with the bill. The other thing, yeah. Okay, so we can talk about that, but I'm going by my drafting attorneys. I'm going by this guy that has worked with me for 14 years to change federal land policy, try to push back on the federal government, now works for the county. I'm going with Reed Richards. You know, she questioned Reed Richards. I would not question Reed Richards in any way, shape, or form. He's a very honorable man, like you mentioned, Lavoy. Now, I had an hour conversation with Sherry Finicum Henderson. That's Lavoy's older sister. And she's got a different take on Lavoy. Very different than what you said. I don't want to get into that, but she does. So, and you ought to listen to her before you start to, come back. Okay. Okay.
I have a substantive response to some of what you raised, sir, about the DLM. The DLM. Yeah. Okay. You may or may not agree with this, but this is where the counties and the legislature and the governor's office plant their flag in the ground, and it's this. And I'm sorry if you disagree with this, because I don't know what else to tell you. But Utah is unique among the 50 states. This pushback to get the lands back, the other 49, we're unique on this, and we ought to celebrate that. And nobody's looking for a pat on the back, but we ought to take a deep breath and count to 10 backwards every now and then, just to see the forest through the trees of what's happening here. That's number one. Number two, Utah continues its audacity by actually thinking to prescribe a management scheme for these lands, for these 38 million acres of lands that come back. That's also very audacious, and it's very good, and people ought to count to 10 backwards and take a deep breath at least once a day and celebrate that fact. No, really, they should. They should pause and think about the audacity. People talk about the audacity of hope. Look at the wonderful audacity of what Utah's doing here. We're trying to get the lands back, and we're so bold as to think that we can legislate a process for managing those lands. We ought to celebrate that fact. Now I come to the core of what I want to say. The bedrock philosophy of this is that the states are sovereign. This is the United States. We should always refer to our government in the plural. It's not a singular monolithic authority. It's the states. But when I hear rhetoric like this that implies the state can't be trusted either, I'm sorry. We have to plant our faith in the state of Utah. Yes, sir, there has to be a DLM. If there's no DLM, if there's no management structure, what do you have? You have chaos. You have anarchy. You have the absence of law, which is the most un-American thing there is. You have to have a structure, and that structure has to revolve around the sovereign state of Utah. If you leave it to just what? The people? You've got to place the ownership of those lands in the state of Utah and expect that the state of Utah will manage those. If you can't do that, then we have an irreconcilable difference. And the pure patriotic and the highest form of patriotism and the highest form of being an American is to place our faith in state government. And that's all this bill has the audacity to do. And for you to push against that and others is to suggest a form of lawlessness and a divorce from structure that is the most un-American thing there is. And so nobody apologizes one whit for having a state agency be so bold as to think that they would manage the land that is transferred to them.
Can I counter on
Sure, I think I've spoken my piece.
And I appreciate your
And
bluntness.
it's a
and your
respectful indictment of what I think
yes,
is
it
your
is. And I
un-American
appreciate
approach.
you being. I appreciate you being straightforward. Okay. Here's my counter to that. Yeah, you want an agency. It's called the DLM. Okay.
Sorry, it sounds like BLM.
Okay. How about this? You have it in place already. They're called sheriffs. But now listen. Hear me out.
Sheriff's job to manage
Time
the
out. Would you hear me out, sir? What? The sheriffs can't, their thing can't be expanded, or their manpower? Let's say you add manpower to it.
You've lost me.
No, no, you're not listening.
I'll listen, but you lost me.
No, you're not. You just said, I lost you.
You want
And
sheriff
I'm
to be a
saying,
management authority?
I'm saying that you have, sir, first of all, I'm not a child, okay? So please don't treat me like one. I was respectful when you spoke. I expect the very same thing from you, sir. All right?
Go ahead.
You are a citizen of the United States of America, just as I am. And we're trying to get good things done for our great state. Now, sir, I will correct myself. Now, I'm looking at what's going on. And you're right. Maybe it is the DLM. It might be. But I know as soon as this thing is signed into law by the governor, and this is why I'm asking, is there a way that, all of a sudden let the talks go around, and I'm going to go, whoa, because I understand the DLM, how it can be tied to federal things. That exists, sir. Now, you're saying to me it's not. So you're going to stake your life right now, your whole thing, both of you guys, and let's say we roll forward 10 years from now.
On state jurisdiction, I stake everything on that, you bet.
Okay.
Got nothing to be ashamed of on there.
There's nothing.
The sovereign state, that's what we all agree
And
as,
I
as
agree
Americans
with that.
and conservatives. We
and I
believe
agree.
in state government.
We're not in disagreement there, sir.
Okay.
We're not. What I'm saying is, sir, because it's been very sober to me my last 5 months of my life, I can't believe where we're at. And we have to be aware of those things. And these gentlemen here put their lives on the line every single day. It's great to hear that we have constitutional sheriffs here. All I'm saying, in closing, because this gentleman wants to talk, all I'm saying is, that's that one thing we just need to make sure, we need to be very careful that the governor signs this into law, that all of a sudden 10 years, we're not going like, oh, geez, and all of a sudden, because of a technicality or whatever, we're in a hornet's nest. That's what I mean.
Okay. Well, you've got a gatekeeper here in these two gentlemen. You've got the legislature who are the state, but they come from the people. You've got a natural check. It's called checks and balances of three branches of government.
Is it a new thought, or is it a response to his statement?
Mine's a new thought.
Oh,
And Sheriff Tracy, while you're up, I do want to ask you a question.
Okay.
I want to ask this of all the sheriffs.
This may answer it. Let me, Sheriff Tracy, Utah County. Going back to the statement that Mark Ward made, that's part of the dilemma, and that's part of the issue, that's part of the clarification that we have as sheriffs and understand. States are sovereign. Counties are not sovereign. Counties are political subdivisions of the state. My authority as sheriff comes from that document right there. It's under Utah Code annotated. There's nothing in this document, the Constitution of the United States, that talks about the office of sheriff. There's nothing in the state of Utah's Constitution that talks about the county sheriff. The county sheriff is an animal, a construct of the legislators of Utah under Title 17, Utah Code Annotated, Chapter 22. It could be ripped in half and null and void tomorrow by legislative action. So where do I get my authority? This is one of the things that I have talked to Sam about before and others, even Richie Mack. When it comes to what I can and can't do, I can't assume unto myself just what I want to do. Then I become the king. I become the tyrant. I become the person who tells this county will do this, and this sheriff becomes the county's dictator for that county. I obey the law, both federal and local, state and county law. I enforce those laws. But what my enumerated powers, authorities, and responsibilities are given or taken away by the state legislature. So when you ask about a constitutional sheriff, you're referring to a sheriff who is in accord with the principles and operates under the principles of the Constitution. Because there is no authority through the Constitution of the United States, there's no authority through the Constitution of the Utah state to give us anything other than what we are given legislatively. That is part of the issue. So when I look at what my duties are within my county, there are things that under the sovereignty of the state must be statewide in its application. And those are appropriate. And I don't want to be doing every enforcement on every one of those little things. Now, there used to be a clause in this Title 17 that said the sheriff was the primary law enforcement officer of the county. That was removed years ago. We have concurrent jurisdiction in cities, and we have primary jurisdiction in all unincorporated area. Again, a construct of what the legislative language is. So we have to look at what our authority is and take our authority from where it comes. It doesn't come from my proposed authorities. It comes from the language and the words in this statute. So that's part of the issue. In this state, in other states, there is no constitutional outlined office of sheriff in this state constitution. There are in other states. And that's something that I've talked about in the past, is it time to put something in there that at least outlines the duties and minimal office duties and responsibilities of sheriff in a state constitution that keeps a legislative body from eroding that? That's something that I have supported in the past, and other groups have too. I haven't had much traction in that. But then again, we need to understand that everything the sheriff does is not what he just wants to do. It has to be based against what legal authority I have or they have, and it comes from the construct within Title 17, Chapter 22, and it is by legislative authority because there is no constitutional office in the state of Utah for sheriff.
Thank you. And Mike, by raising hands, are your sheriff offices equipped to take on the responsibility of managing 38 million acres of public land that would come with a transfer?
I think the question would be more, we're willing to do it, but are we currently funded to do it? No. Unless there's one in here that I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's
We're losing that comment, Sam. So maybe. So anyway, we ready to move on? Or okay. I know we're running out of time. We gotta be. I mean, so you guys have already. I'm sure you've got plenty to do. But by the way, thank you, sheriffs. Oh, Scott Bradley, Cache County again. Thank the sheriffs for being here. I must tell you that I have never, ever received a ticket in your counties. So therefore, I think that you will say something about my law-abidingness, okay? Your statement. Yeah, there you go. There you go. So all you guys are my friends as far as I can tell, and I'm glad you're here because I do really believe the sheriffs are an essential element in our peacekeeping efforts. Your efforts in military, some almost 50 years ago, I took the same oath you did to defend the Constitution. I take it seriously. No expiration date, okay? So I think we're on the same page in so many ways. We want to make certain that Utah assumes what was rightfully theirs from the very beginning, in accordance with Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, in accordance with Article 4, in accordance with the Northwest Ordinance that was passed by the first Congress. All of these things, we are on solid ground. And we really, truly, constitutionally, this land should be in our state. Absolutely. And there should not be any question about that at the federal level. How we go about that, we need to talk some more, Representative. Absolutely. Fact of the matter is, we're on the same page. I wished we hadn't got bogged down with this sheriff issue. I mean, that was about 10% of my issue today. It really was. I mean, honestly, if you read, starting on line 350, it says, except as provided in subsections 4B and C, the local sheriff, county sheriff, is the primary law enforcement authority with jurisdiction on public land to enforce this chapter and rules issued by the director pursuant to subsection 1. Okay, so except as noted, and then your first exception is the director may employ and utilize within the DLM, the Divisional Land Management, certified peace officers that, if and when deployed, will be the primary law enforcement authority with jurisdiction on public land.
To enforce this chapter and rules issued pursuant to subsection 1. Okay?
Absolutely. So they're going to be the primary law enforcement officers. Now,
for that section.
Let's just make sure that everybody understands that it says that in there if these conditions exist. So just know that there's some question as to whether or not you're going to be the primary law enforcement officer if that question comes up.
Scott, can we just get that? I want to get that clear because that is a very narrow, small scope of the bill. I mean, of what they have enforcement in that particular area. Am I right on that, Ruth Ann? It's very, very limited.
Reading. You should have kept reading.
You kept reading because it
law enforcement authority with jurisdiction on public land to enforce this chapter and rules issued pursuant to subsection 1.
Only that section of the chapter.
That's right.
That's what I'm trying to say.
You got to finish that sentence.
You got to finish it because we carve out a very small section, and whether he decides that to be grazing or whether he decides it to be minerals, I don't see very many that you couldn't do administratively. And also, everything that he does under that section when he becomes, we have authority from the legislature to do that. I don't want you to put 10 law enforcement. Nobody in the legislature wants them to do that. But we can clarify that and say, this will be subject to whatever. But it's that little tiny section.
Mike, that's where I'm going. Is this?
Okay.
We need to clarify.
Okay.
I'd love to work with you. So don't.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm not up here trying to.
No, I understand.
Brains out. I just want to say that there needs to be clarification. And
but that's something that I have been hammered on by people continually for the last week. They've said, oh, he's creating this huge new agency that's going to be a law enforcement arm like the BLM. Listen, the BLM has gotten so far outside of their scope. For the first 15 years, we didn't have one BLM ranger out there. You had one guy, Skip, or two guys in Salt Lake City that coordinated with every single sheriff in the state when they did anything. That would have worked. When they started bringing in armed law enforcement officers and arresting people, giving them traffic tickets on the highway, that's when it got completely out of control. And that's what I've been doing for 14 years, is stop that encroachment against our county sheriff.
The BLM truly is off the reservation, so to speak. Maybe
Absolutely.
a poor use of terms in terms of the way we're talking about land.
You can't say that about BIA.
You need to be on a radio show sometime. But let me just finish here very quickly. I know I came with 8 or 10 other issues that I wanted to be able to discuss because the sheriffs, you guys have got a lot on your plate already, but there's a ton of other things. Sometime we might meet Mike and talk about this, I hope. But let's just take a DAQ, Division of Air Quality. Another division of the state of Utah that has metastasized into basically an EPA in Utah. And I think here's a division that's, again, off the reservation, if we can do that for a minute. This division of air quality has metastasized into something that's telling us whether or not in northern Utah we can heat our homes with wood-burning stoves.
The solution is
Okay, now
can I mention something on that, Scott, just so you understand this? And this is simply what that deals with. The DAQ has primacy to deal with the Air Quality Act of the United States. They have no authority outside of that in terms of that. We even regulate them. We said you can't have any laws that are more effective than the federal laws. So we have primacy. But if we lose that primacy of the DAQ, which the feds can reach in and grab, guess who has primacy then?
the feds don't have primacy. No, they don't. They really don't. They have no constitutional authority.
I agree with that, but if you want to take that fight on and kick the EPA or the EPA out of our state,
let's do it.
Take it on. I'm okay. You know what? I tried to do that.
Here's the issue, though. There was a philosophical capturing of the Division of Air Quality in Utah. They report to the governor, supposedly, but the governor comes in and he endorses this idea of taking away, and that's just as one little example. And so the governor comes in and says, looks like we're going to shut you guys down that want to heat your houses with wood-burning stoves.
Oh, yeah.
And so there was a lot of us that came up and said, you'll pry our wood-burning stove from our cold, dead fingers, okay? And I think the legislature stepped in and rightfully said, this ain't going to happen, okay? What I'd like to see is something, and this is on law enforcement, it's on land ownership, it's on the idea of the Americanist principle of stewardship. And the state does not have primacy to own the largest portion of the state land. Now, it was said earlier in the filmed portion that there's this image that's come to Utah about public lands, and we've got to maintain that. That was never in the Americanist principles to begin with. America was based upon private ownership. And to say now that we're going to, in the wording of this, allow somebody, whether it's the Greenpeace guys or whoever it is, I've picked somebody that's not in the state right now, if they can capture the philosophy of the Division of Land Management, suddenly this Division of Land Management becomes an onerous burden on the states. And I would like to see a philosophy that's incorporated into the bill that says we're moving towards an Americanist solution. And the Americanist solution, if you look everything that happened from the eastern seaboard to the Mississippi, we see what the intent of the Founding Fathers was. It was not for huge tracts of land to be held by the federal government. It's not for huge tracts of land to be held by the state governments. These things were handed down. Utah, if you take all of the land that's owned by some government agency, local, county, state, federal, we approach 80% of our state is owned by some level of some government. And now if you take Marx's definition of communism, we're 80% communist. And so I'm saying we need to move towards a situation where the original Americanist perspective begins to come forward. And I think that's going to be hard to do, Mike.
No, I know it will.
Because we got people.
What you're talking about is when we take it over, we open a new homesteading act, is what you're talking
about. Maybe. I don't know.
Well, I'm going to let Kevin answer that because
anyway,
I've already fought
I've taken
this
more
argument.
time than I should have, and I thank you for your time, and I thank you guys again for being here.
I understand
And just
what you're
watch
saying.
for me on the road, okay?
Oh, I know. Yeah.
I want to just share one example that's going on in Sevier County. Right now, we have no BLM ranger and no forest ranger, and everything works great. Okay, BLM, if they have something going on, they come down, they call me.
That's perfect.
We go out and deal with it. Forest Service, if they have an issue, they come to my office. I send a deputy out, we deal with it. It costs us a ton of money, but we're doing it. The last question I have, and this is for you, Representative Noel. Did you at any point in time intend to diminish the authority of sheriff through this bill?
Absolutely not. and it doesn't do it according to your own legal advisor, it does not diminish the authority of the sheriff any way than what it is right now that you guys have, because you've never had authority. I mean, I've given you authority, we've given you that. We said you've got authority over all the public lands, but those particular resources, you couldn't go in there and say, you can cut timber, you can graze that. Not there. That authority's not there. Now we're going to take it over. And so I assume that you're going to have more authority than you've had before, and that we'll work with you to increase that authority. That's my whole objective on this. The bill is out there. One of the things we've really tried hard not to do is, I appreciate Scott, and I understand what you're talking about. And there's actually legislators up there that say, you know, we ought to just put this land up for sale. The problem with that right now, Scott, is this. You're going to trade up, okay, so who can buy this land if you sell it in big chunks? Well, you could put that in there, but it's not necessarily true. If it's a corporation, that's a U.S. citizen. They can buy it. Okay, Ted Turner could buy it. SUA could buy it. The Friends of the Earth could buy it. You could turn it over to any number of people that could buy this land and make it worse than we are. They could create so much of a morass of problems. How do you deal with all the rights-of-ways? How do you deal with all the rights for mineral resources? How do you deal with the guys that are grazing the land? I've got a permit. I go out there and say we're going to sell it all off. I got every farmer and rancher in a $17 billion industry in the state saying, I reject that bill. So that point that you made, it's come out from early on. And the position we've taken is, just as the governor's taken, this is a public land state. It's going to remain a public land state. So I don't know how we get around that one unless you've got a whole group of people. I mean, I'm talking the environmentalist types that don't want it done to the right-wing people that say, hey, I want to maintain my grazing permit. I'm a cowboy. I want to go out there and use my OHV. I want to have these lands that I grew up with for 100 years in Utah, be able to access them. I don't want it to be like Texas where there's no private property anywhere. So that's going to be a tough one. Now, sportsmen, they'll come out of the woodwork. $4 or $5 billion industry. You mean you're selling all these lands off that we can't go on public land anymore? You have got so many people. I don't support that. I do not support that. I'm sorry. I just don't do it.
It's interesting. Stewardship comes into this, and these things can be dealt with in the legislation. Stewardship is a part of ownership.
Yeah.
States and national governments have been horrible stewards.
Right.
We need to go back to the way that manages everything most appropriately. I think we can deal with it, Mike.
Okay, let's talk about it. I'm open to talking about it.
We've gone way over time, even though there's no time limit on the internet. There's a time limit on my having to pay a staff to do this. So we are done. The final comment goes to Representative Stratton, and we'll wrap the session up.
Thank you. I've enjoyed listening today. I've heard words like czar, communism, socialism, liars, failing to uphold your constitutional fealty to the oaths that you've made, seeking riches, and worst of all, Nancy Pelosi. Now, my wife is wise. She said, if somebody doesn't mean to offend you, don't take offense. You're a fool if you do anyway. Ladies and gentlemen, I ask us not to stand in a circular firing squad. You have my word that this bill is a beginning point and not an ending point. Don't ask me to sign anything. You have more than you could ever want when you have the word of Kevin Stratton. Now I ask us to stand together and be careful with the terms that we use. Because I guarantee you, I am no Nancy Pelosi. When we talk about the state of Utah, we talk about 3 million citizens within this state. This bill represents one of probably 60 pieces of legislation. And there will be more. But this is just the beginning. Have faith in us. Let us not give counsel to our fears. Let us not shrink. We're fighting enough battles without fighting each other. We're on the same page. Now let's move forward together. That's what I would offer.
Okay, with that statement, we wrap up. Thank you very much for participating in this audience. For those who actually dialed in on the internet for this conversation, thank you. And do us a favor, let's make those counts go up. So tell everybody about this from Sheriff, and we'll look for you next week on the county seat. Thank you.
Well said, Kevin. That was fantastic. Very good.
All of